Welcome to FOB TV, the future of business. I'm your host, Kevin Benedict. I'm a futurist and lecturer at TCS, and I want to thank each of you for joining us on the program today. I'm really intrigued with our guest today, and I'm really excited to introduce him. His name is Dr. Aaron Dossey. Aaron, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, Dr. Dossey has a PhD. He's a biochemist and biomedical scientist, and he has a very keen interest in bugs, particularly as a protein source for humans. We're going to have a fun talk today. But before we jump into that, where does this call find you today, Dr. Dossey?
Today, I am in Oklahoma City, where I live, but I just got back from Honduras. I never thought I would find myself going back and forth to Central America, but it's actually really, really nice down there.
Well, great. Well, I've been going back and forth to a lot of places over the last 3 weeks as well, back and forth to London twice, just talking about the future and brainstorming about the future with a lot of interesting organizations. So Honduras, I imagine, has some very interesting bugs, Dr. Dossey.
Yeah, I haven't been out collecting there.
Yeah.
But they have, being Central America, Latin America, they have giant scarabs are one of the major things there. They have the gold scarabs that look like they're made out of gold, or other species that look like they're made out of silver. Those are some of the interesting things that attract me to the fauna in Latin America.
Oh, yeah. Years ago, I was, my wife and I and our children were sleeping on a bed under a bug net in Jaco, Costa Rica. And it was crazy. The sounds of giant bugs as big as your hands, walking on the wall, hitting the net. It was just an incredible experience. So I read, when I was looking at some of your background information, Dr. Dossey, that you have bred stick insects almost as long as your arm, and some as big and fat as 2 cigars. Now, that is more than large. That's gigantic. Why were you breeding those? What was the project you were working on?
Yeah, so I mean, that's the cigar thing was the fastest way I could think to describe the big species, but it's always been a hobby. Ever since in high school, I had to do collections for honors biology and zoology, and that's kind of what got me hooked. And then I just kept on, joined Young Entomology Society, and it's been a hobby ever since then. But it was a hobby all the way through the end of grad school. And then I had some side projects on insect chemistry that I was just doing for extra publications, just something fun to do. And so I kind of got into breeding them for research purposes. But it's kind of, and we can talk about a nonprofit I founded later to kind of combine like zoos, public displays of biodiversity, and research at the same location. But the walking sticks are cool because, like, as you said, they're huge. We got one that I bred actually for the insect zoo I had for a while up here.
Oh, wow.
From Indonesia. And they're just cool. They're big. Some of them fly. They have chemical defenses, which is kind of interesting to my research.
Yeah.
Some of my research. And they're actually a small group of insects, only 4,000 species compared to things like beetles. But there's a lot of diversity. They're parthenogenic. Some only breed females, and there's just a lot of cool stuff. But mostly because they look cool.
I love it. So, also in my background research, you've made numerous recognizable food products using insects as a major ingredient. And I read that one of your favorite is an insect-based taco meat. How did you get into that, Jack?
Yeah, so, and I should clarify a critical point of fact, not using walking sticks. They're cool for display, they're cool for research, probably not going to be a major food crop.
Got it.
A few different reasons. But yeah, I was trying to get a faculty job basically. And one of the things I did was trying to apply for grants to get funding to show you can have success there to get a faculty job. And I was selected for a Gates Foundation grant. And I could talk more, about that if you're interested. I was unemployed and then we're about to be unemployed soon. And hey, Gates Foundation, but I had to literally found a company in order to qualify. But the taco meat thing was like, hey, I'm going to get this project. It's to make insect-based food because it's sustainable and can, feed the world in places that need, have food insecurity. So I said, okay, I'm a biochemist. How do I make food out of bugs? So I got some bugs at the pet shop, like the mealworms and crickets that you can buy for reptiles, and just started grinding them up. And it was late one night watching Letterman, and I was okay. And one of the ingredients in like RUTF, ready to use therapeutic food products for malnourished children, is like milk powder as a high quality protein source. So I said, well, can you pasteurize it? Can you treat the juice from insects? Can you extract them, the liquid, the protein, and treat it like milk? Because it pasteurized, does it congeal? As a biochemist, I know you heat proteins, they can solidify like an egg or something. So I was doing that, and then I was sleepy really late at night, and I thought, well, it's turning into solid. Maybe I can make a burger patty. And I started putting it around in a pan and mixing it and sauteing it. And it was looked like taco meat. So I think I added some seasoning, and I pulled a packet of taco seasoning out, started mixing it around, and wow, this turned into meat. And it was really good. Actually, I gave it to my grandparents, who are, older generation, not exotic eaters, but they actually really, really liked it and said it was better than Taco Bell.
Did you tell them what was in the meat?
Oh, yes. You have to disclose food ingredients in general and generally advisable. People don't like surprises in their food.
Wow. So you have written that insects will inevitably be the major source of protein on the food market. Why do you think that? Tell us about that.
I think it's, population grows. We're running out of natural resources broadly. Almost all the land is cleared for agriculture and things. Insects are extremely efficient at converting what they eat into body mass, into protein, fats and oils, nutrients for whatever that consumes them, which includes us. They're small, they're very prolific. You can scale up very quickly. So as far as food security, they're very good. They're just a very good, high quality protein crop. Animal-based, so you got the animal-based nutrients that some of your plants lack. Growing them indoors, you can grow them close to cities. We can talk more about things like that, right? They just make so much sense as an efficient commodity to produce for proteins considered compared to many of the other things that will probably be extremely difficult and expensive going forward, like meat, beef, even dairy and things. So I think it's just they have so much working for them as a high quality thing to produce easily and efficiently and lower risk than some of these other things. Even compared to soy and some plant proteins, they have a lot of advantages. I think it makes so much sense. It's inevitable. At some point, it's just going to, it's already a thing. It makes too much sense not to use this as a commodity.
So tell us a little bit about that process, Dr. Dossey. What does it take to grow these bugs and then process them into food grade material?
So they're grown indoors, which has a lot of advantages. That you can control the environment, you can control the hygiene, keep things like the food industry struggling with now, viruses. Insects don't carry human viruses because they're invertebrates, and E. coli, big problems with E. coli right now, Listeria, Salmonella, then not to be found in insect farms. They're very prolific. So, like a lot of eggs per female. So you grow them indoors in either boxes or trays, depending on whether it's a cricket or a mealworm or what you're producing. Then I patented the process to convert them into the ingredient. You grind them up and then turn them into powder. Some companies, and this is why I focus on ingredients early, grind them up or roast them first to dry them like a peanut or something, maybe a grain, and then grind them up. And they were even calling it flour, which the industry is trying to kind of move past that for reasons that are in my book. But you have to use so much heat to dry an insect because the body has a cuticle, an exoskeleton that's designed because they use very little water. One of the other advantages, they use very little water compared to other crops and things. So it takes a lot of heat to dry them. So you grind them up treat them as a liquid, pasteurize it like any other product to kill any kind of bacteria, because nothing is sterile and natural. An animal is not sterile. A plant is not sterile from the field. You have to, any food product has to have something to kill whatever's on it. Then dry it. And I use spray drying as the method, but you turn it into a powder. Then you just use that powder like any other ingredient in different food products. Look at its shelf life, look at its functionality. How does it blend with other stuff? How does it, as I was talking about with the taco meat, how does it react to heating? and what can you use? Have flavor profiles, aroma profiles, just like any other powder ingredient.
So what does it taste like, that particular product, and what does it smell like?
So the powder actually has kind of a grain-like, like a malt aroma. And I think that might be because of the farms that I buy the crickets from have a largely corn-based diet. So I think you're getting some corn notes, although our process gets rid of a lot of the aroma notes from it. So and the food industry likes neutral protein ingredients. But it kind of it's bitter because it's a protein, and if you eat it, but of course, like you wouldn't just straight up take a spoonful of milk powder. You make other things with it. You put it in a cookie, in a tamale, in a manufactured like a cereal snack. A certain percentage of the ingredients, protein bars. You blend it with other stuff, so but if you cook it like the taco meat, it really does have a meat-like aroma and flavor. There's even research in South Korea a couple of years ago showing that if you add insect powder to like plant-based meats, they get a more meat-like aroma and flavor profile. So, but mostly when you want to blend it as a nutrient source and as a bulk protein ingredient, and then you let your other ingredients do the work on the flavor.
So you also talk about insect farming beyond Earth, where insects are the primary protein crop for places like the moon or Mars or space. So tell us about that, what you're thinking there, and how hard would it be to, I guess, grow bugs as a source of protein in space?
Yeah, actually, we're so if you think about those environments, and by the way, we're looking for some collaborators and funding to develop our space food production projects, and in general, the company is looking for investors right now. We can talk about that.
So if you have money and you're interested, talk to Dr. Dossey.
Yes, we are a pioneer in the industry. We've done more innovation in this space than probably any other company, especially considering our size. Talk to us. I think you'll be. You want to invest if you're in the food and ag space. You want to invest in insects, and we're the company in the Western Hemisphere to look at. But as far as space, it's a very ironically, and a resource constrained environment situation. Everything that's going to be up there going forward is going to be brought from Earth, especially food products, proteins, carbohydrate, any materials are going to come from here. So to recycle them and use them, it needs to be extremely efficient. And insects are small, they're prolific, so you can replenish, you can scale up, because you're going to have to, if you're going to produce food up there, you're going to have to scale up to production very quickly and minimize how much stuff you have to use and minimize waste. So insects are small, prolific, high nutrient dense. So there's not a lot of parts like a soybean. You don't eat the stalks and the roots and things. There's not a lot of waste involved in an insect. And as far as an animal, you're getting animal-based nutrients. And as far as animals, they're given their size and how prolific they are, the only animal that's going to be feasible for those places for the foreseeable future.
Interesting. So you've also said that DARPA has funded some of your work as well. Tell us about that.
So they actually called me, which I think is kind of a little bit how DARPA works. Sometimes they're funding things that are so exotic that sometimes they have to shop around before they put a grant out to even determine if there's a business or a lab that even does what they're thinking yet. So they called, and they were trying to get a hold of a protein bar company, and then they finally found my company. And I said, "Well, congratulations! I'm a molecular biologist, so this is a better fit than a bar company for the project." But it was to genetically engineer the big project was genetically engineering of insects and applications broadly. So they had universities working on some aspects for agriculture, and then they looked at the small businesses for how can you improve insects they're already a phenomenal food crop, efficiency and water and feed uses and all these things. But how can you make them better? How can you, for example, they were aware that there are some viruses that affect cricket farms, cricket-specific viruses. In fact, species-specific. They will affect one cricket, house cricket.
DARPA, who we think about in the context of weapon systems and the internet and robots, they were aware of cricket viruses.
So how my understanding of how DARPA works, learning from it just from that phone call, I just knew DARPA, internet, weird military stuff. I even thought they had labs. They don't even have their own labs. They're kind of a funding relationship building entity, essentially, as I understand it. But so they hire program managers in topics. I think maybe people apply to the jobs, or they go scout, and however they find their program managers, and they hire somebody that says, I have a vision for this. Because they don't do a lot of biological sciences, but they've done stuff in the medical sciences and different things. And I guess they hired a biologist, an entomologist program manager that had a vision of how you could use genetic engineering in insects, was his big idea. So they give them 2 years, and I think they can extend that, but a certain amount of time to build a program, put out a grant, fund some labs to do a certain body of research, and then they're out. And then if they're still interested, they hire other program managers, or they keep it, or they move it to other parts of DARPA. We were in the SBIR, so every agency of government has a small business innovation research grant section, and so we were hired. Our grant was through the SBIR program. They hire a program manager and build a program, and then they go shopping.
Oh, that's crazy. So, Dr. Dossey, as a futurist, we are often talking to clients and organizations about the notion of convergence, where the future is not about one kind of trend or one kind of technology. It's the convergence of all kinds of things. And when I look at some of the hottest trends out there, they have to do with genome and genetic engineering and all of this stuff. And I see you're involved in so much of that in the context of bugs. I just find that so fun that all of that is converging around bugs. So talk to us about the projects where you're looking at bugs in the context of vaccines. That's fascinating.
So it started out with, like I said, DARPA called us for the nutrition as a food crop, higher in vitamin A, resistant to viruses, so they're more robust as a crop. And I've been thinking about this for a few years. Even back when I was applying for faculty jobs, I was thinking about bioprospecting insects to discover new lead drug compounds. And then, of course, can you engineer them to make something for you that they're not already making? But then when I finally, had a lab set up to do this stuff, I thought maybe there's a good opportunity to do some spin-off ideas of that. And one of the concepts was engineer an insect to produce a part of a virus, as what a vaccine is typically, a part of a pathogen, a protein, called an antigen, is the thing your body recognizes to go kill it. And so if you could make insects produce these things, insects are very cheap to produce compared to cell culture and some of these, more exotic things. They can be produced in remote areas. There's a lot of the food aspect, efficiencies and benefits kind of translate to bioproduction broadly. So I thought, what if we did, of course, we were in the middle of the COVID when I was doing this work. So we did spike protein and mealworms and had them producing it. But things like influenza, can you engineer a mealworm to produce influenza hemagglutinin, like is in vaccines, and vaccinate a flock of chickens by just feeding them the mealworms? And so those are the kind of things I'm thinking about along those lines.
And genome, what kind of, in the context of genome and genomics, what were you doing there with bugs?
So the project narrowly was first sequence the genomes, because you need that data, the genome, in order to engineer them to target which part of the genomes to design the thing that you're putting in so you can fit it in there. And so we did that. That house cricket and the yellow mealworm are the two major produced insects currently, at least in North America. And then once we had the genome, we've published that last year, actually. You can find on our website, and find me on LinkedIn, and you can find links to our articles.
What's your website, Dr. Dossey?
Allthingsbugs.com.
Allthingsbugs.com.
Yes. And the nonprofit is also isibugs.org. You may ask me about that later. But so once you have the genome data, then you put in genes, and it's just a matter of what you want the bug to do for you. So the project was vitamin A and disease resistant and virus resistant. So we were looking for the genes that produce vitamin A from bacteria and other and plants and things, B12 and things like this. We're looking for vitamin biosynthesis genes to put in the insect so it produces the vitamin that we wanted. And the disease resistant one was an interesting thing because there was a lot less to work with. How do you make an organism resistant to viruses? And we some proprietary things we were exploring, but we were looking at ways to prevent it from replicating, for example.
So part of what we talk about, again, around convergence is we're looking at all kinds of trends out there, things like quantum computing, AI, bioengineering, all this stuff. And you talk about using insect-based drug discovery. And that makes me chuckle because that's also, they talk about quantum computing and artificial intelligence as things that could help with drug discovery. And you're doing it with bugs. That is crazy cool.
Yeah, that is actually tied to the work of the nonprofit Invertebrate Studies Institute, which we're looking for partners, collaborators, and of course, philanthropists to support our work there. I can tell you more about our biotech biotome concept.
Yeah, tell us about that.
So the genome part is we want to sequence the genomes of all insect species on Earth, which sounds huge and exotic, but it's the technology is very mature and low cost, and that's a very feasible thing to do. It would cost less than $1 billion. In the probably. I ran the math on it recently, but the prices have gotten cheaper on genome sequencing.
So if you have a spare billion, talk to Dr. Dossey.
For less than was paid for Twitter, for sure, much less. But the idea is insects are the biggest and most diverse group of organisms on Earth. And so if you have their biological blueprint, the DNA sequences, you have the biological blueprint of a majority of life on Earth, which would probably be, as a philanthropist, the greatest contribution to science, maybe for all time. It's kind of with the technology, how it's one and done. It's not like the human genome in the 90s where you could bit by bit for decades, academics would work on it. You would have them and it would be a resource. But because of their diversity and because of how they've adapted and developed over billions of years, you could use that data to feed AI algorithms for things like to help with biotechnology and drug discovery, protein folding, protein structure, discovery of new secondary metabolites and new biological pathways, so new ways to manufacture, say, a drug or a part of a drug, as well as just the lead compounds from insects. It's huge. It would be a huge asset to biotech AI, but also the nonprofit, we want to do old school drug discovery, just grind up bugs, put them on an HPLC, do bioassays and see what kind of compounds. Antibiotics, antimicrobials are huge in invertebrates. They use them to defend themselves more than say T cells and things like humans do. But the organization generally, now that we're introducing Invertebrate Studies Institute, kind of a Jurassic Park like concept. Without a huge history, when I was early in my doing my projects on insect chemistry, I realized it's hard to get a zoo to work with you on research projects or a museum. They just don't seem to be interested in collaborating with researchers. But researchers aren't doing a lot of outreach and displaying things like a zoo would. So public education. So, why not? And I realized that I was growing stick insects, all these cool bugs, and looking for compounds in a lab. And why not have a place where you would display them? Because you have to grow them anyway. You have to put in all the resources and effort to grow these things. And also tell the public about the research you're doing. So build a biodome with thousands of species of plants and insects that you're using for research. At the same time, you're just showing people cool stuff and immersing people in biodiversity that they don't get to see. Because I feel like a lot of why people kind of don't care much, there's a problem with not caring a lot about biodiversity. It's because it's like, oh, who cares about some bug on the other side of the world that, they're gonna clear a forest and give us beef from someplace. I don't want to offend anybody in places where there's a lot of this happening, but it's all over the world. Why do we care? If you see it, if you can hold this walking stick or one of these giant things or a giant moth in the size of your face or something, And also at the same time, at the same location, have scientists telling you, oh, by the way, we sequenced the genome and we discovered a new antibiotic that's now in clinical trials from that.
Wow.
If you could have a place where people could be immersed in the benefits, the why we should care, as well as, wow, this thing is cool. I can come here and take a look at them anytime I want. I think there's, especially with biodiversity loss and things right now, it's kind of a desperate need for this kind of thing. So this is the aspiration of Invertebrate Studies Institute. So if you're a billionaire, as you say, check out our website, isibugs.org. Give me a call. Hit me up on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Now, you've also said that this fascinating work that you're doing has also stirred up trolls and conspiracy theorists. What's that all about?
Well, that could be a topic for another show broadly. But okay. What happened? I think the reason specifically why some groups honed on me. It's not me. I haven't had death threats or anything crazy, but it was basically I got the Gates Foundation grant. And there are people that maybe don't understand how science works. They don't understand our institutions and how and why government is valuable. They don't, and there are people that don't like authority and can't accept authority. There's a lot psychologically going on. But I got the Gates Foundation grant, and there are a lot of people that say that Bill Gates is the evil empire, and they also think, ooh, yuck bugs. It's something that they don't like associated with something that somebody that they don't like. And they immediately took that to say he's going to force us all to eat insects while he's eating filet mignon. That's a big elite versus non-elite kind of thing. And I kind of get wrapped up in that because I got a few bucks from the Gates Foundation.
Wow. Well, I think that probably means you're doing something scientific and something that's good for humanity. So I'm going to say, Dr. Dossey, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing this fascinating work. For anyone out there that's interested in any of these projects, again, look up Dr. Aaron T. Dossey on LinkedIn or look up any of the websites that we mentioned. Why don't you mention those again here? Your websites are?
Sure. All Things Bugs LLC is allthingsbugs.com. Actively seeking investors right now. Good time to get in the insect protein space as an investor. And the nonprofit Invertebrate Studies Institute, isibugs.org.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Dossey, and thank everyone out there for joining us today.
Thank you. Take care.